to talk to us today all the way from Los Angeles area is Dick Norton, N6AA. He's our Southwestern Division Director for the ARRL, and he just came back from the board meeting with the league, so he's going to give us lots of information. Please hold your questions until he asks. Of course, you can ask questions on this frequency, 146.55. But wait till he asks for your input. And Dick, take it away.
Okay, I'm not used to giving these forms, holding a microphone, push the talk button, but I guess that's how it works, and I will be doing that.
You want a CW key?
I'm mostly on CW, so I'm somewhat disappointed that this wasn't provided for. But in any event, we're out here in the Sonoran Desert in western Arizona, and we're here at a reduced version of Quartzfest, which has been called QuartzPause by Chris, and I'm pleased to announce that they have a substantial wind of maybe 10 miles an hour blowing, so that all COVID-19 virus germs are carried away from each other, and we won't spread them. And fortunately, they placed a trailer behind me so that the wind isn't that aggressive. Today, at this event, we have another director, Tom Abernathy, W3TOM, who also has returned from the ARRL Board of Directors meeting. He attended the meeting in Texas, he tells me. I attended the meeting in Los Angeles. So actually, we connected by the internet on a Zoom meeting, as many of you are doing with your radio clubs these days. Also, we have with us is Rick Paquette, Arizona Section Manager, W7RAP. At Quartzfest this year, there are maybe 160 or so motorhomes where the hams are staying at night, and they're of course isolated from each other. They're in their own motorhomes, and normally they have maybe 500 or more of them. So it's a reduced attendance, but with the internet and the broadcast, it's pretty decent coverage. They have this event being recorded, and it's also on ATV so that people are actually watching it in their motorhomes. Let me start out by going over some of the things the ARRL is doing, and then we'll cover some issues in ham radio in general. We'll cover what went on in the board meeting. We'll cover some ARRL politics issues. And let's begin by, the first thing the league does is publish some magazines. And the primary magazine you all know is QST, and most league members get it. But in the last year, the league has started a new magazine which is directed at beginners, and the name of the magazine is On the Air. And some members have chosen On the Air as their primary league publication. You get a choice of one of them in print version. You get all the rest of them electronically over the internet, should you desire. And interestingly enough, almost 20,000 people have signed up to have On the Air as their primary magazine. It's kind of smaller, and then the articles are directed at beginners, but there's a substantial market for that, and people are pleased. There are two other publications that the league is involved with that you can also access freely on the internet. One of them is QEX, the technical magazine. It used to be back 50 or so years ago, there were pretty technical articles in QST, but as ham radio has evolved to be not only a technical hobby, but a public service endeavor and a social endeavor, a lot of people can't quite understand them. But if you do, there are articles in here, and you can access those freely on the ARRL website if you're a member. Another magazine is the National Contest Journal, NCJ. It has kind of a different relationship to the league. The league doesn't actually control it. The league publishes and distributes it, but it's run by the National Contest Journal itself. And even if you're not interested in contests, sometimes you'll find nice antenna articles in it and things like that. And you might ask, well, why wasn't this antenna article in QST? The answer really is the editor of the NCJ had some friend of his who thought that this antenna was nice, and they wrote an article, and that editor put it in NCJ. So there are things in here that all kinds of hams might like. So again,
Just reset the timer.
I'm told to reset the timer. In any event, you have a pretty wide selection of publications to view, particularly electronically. People have asked, can I actually subscribe to them and get them all? Well, you can certainly pay money and get QEX and NCJ sent to your home. And I think that there was some methodology available where you can do on the air. It's on the ARRL website. What else is the ARRL doing? The ARRL is ham radio's primary interface to government and the FCC. And this year, there have been really two issues. The first one is the FCC is probably taking away our 3.3 gigahertz band. And most of you probably don't operate on 3.3 gigahertz, but what it is used for is people who have the interconnected websites use it to connect between one and another. And they have used repurposed Wi-Fi equipment and been able to make these connections at a fairly inexpensive, kind of clever way. And now that will probably go away and they'll have to do something else. This hasn't actually happened yet, but the FCC has basically told us that we're going to lose that band. And if you think we have any possibility of reversing that, I'd say the chances are roughly zero. Remember, government is losing frequencies. The FCC is repurposing a lot of these microwave bands for 5G, 4G, whatever, and a lot of the rest of society is using them significantly now, and we're not going to overcome that, I don't believe. Hope I reset the timer. Now, the second thing that's happened and will impact most of us is the FCC has told the ham radio community that it's going to start charging $35 for licenses. That, as I understand it, will be $35 once you pass a test and get issued a license, or if you renew your current license, or you do something like apply for a vanity call. That has not been implemented yet. The league is still trying somewhat to possibly get it changed, although it doesn't look possible. There is a law that was passed in Congress that says that government agencies have to basically try to recoup their fees like this from the people who benefit from it. And the FCC originally came out and said they wanted $50, and the league kind of, at least I believe, lobbied it down to $35. On one hand, there's plenty of people who think $3.50 a year for a license isn't going to kill anything. But my suspicion is, when it comes to people getting licensed, as opposed to people who are really interested in ham radio, it might make a difference. It's my suspicion that these days almost half the people who pass the test really don't have that much interest in ham radio. They've attended because their spouse was interested, or they went with a friend, and if you can attend a 2-hour cram licensing course and 97% of the people pass the test. It's not too difficult a barrier, and many people are getting in that way that really don't have great interest in it. But I think it's still good that they came and they learned about ham radio and they know something, and they're, to my way of thinking, likely to have a positive view of ham radio when anything else might impact their association with it. So I think that number is going to go way down. Normally at a forum like this, I kind of ask, does anyone have any comment on that? And I'll ask the audience here, and I'll also let up on the repeater and see if anyone on the air wants to comment. Go ahead.
Will the $35 fee affect those of us that have a number of different repeaters in various areas?
The question was, will the $35 fee affect those of us who have a number of repeaters? And my suspicion is yes. I think every license is going to ask for $35. I'm not 100% certain of that. I would say at this point, the league hasn't done anything because the FCC hasn't defined how they're going to collect this money. Are the VECs going to collect money and then forward it to the FCC? Will there be some way that licensees directly pay the FCC electronically? We don't know the answer to that yet. Another question I have is, the ARL all the individual VECs are doing a lot of the licensing work for the FCC. Are they going to somehow split the $35 or not? Or was there some thinking that the $50 down to $35 did some way accommodate that? I don't know, but that's my suspicion, that you'll have to pay that for each repeater. And some people have said, well, people who are hogging a lot of call signs, this might suggest that they wouldn't do that. I'll add another thing that might be of interest. In Australia, I believe it's about $75 a year to have a ham license. So really nobody who isn't interested renews them. And they have a much smaller population, but the ham population is a percentage of people, but the number of active hams of the number of licensed hams is very high because of that high cost of the licensing. Any other comments or questions? Okay, on to other things. Let's see. Let me talk a little bit now about Homeowner Association legislation. For the last 30 or so years, the League has spent in the millions of dollars attempting to get Homeowners Association-related legislation through Congress. At this point, 30 years, they haven't succeeded. In Arizona, they came fairly close in the past 10 years or so for a couple of years, and then that didn't work. Similarly, in Hawaii, they had a bill passed that made it all the way to the governor's desk and then eventually failed. So the question is, should the League continue this? And it's a question open for debate. My thought is, it's sort of okay for us to keep trying, but what happened this last year, one fella told me, he said, a couple of years ago, the League was advertising that they were right on the cusp of success, and he went and bought a residence in a homeowners association controlled area, and he thought that in a year, all the rules regarding the antennas would go away and he'd be able to do what he wanted. Well, even if, as it turned out, the legislation that we thought was, or told that it was close to passing, was found by the rest of the board to be below what hams wanted. In other words, that legislation, let me pause here, really, go to your HOA, and if they gave you permission, you could put up an antenna. And the background of what they had to do, it wasn't deemed to be favorable for hams in HOA areas. So even if we continue to do this, I suggest that people don't rely on this as their primary method of thinking that they're going to put antennas up. It's my observation that many people have successfully somehow or other put antennas up. I've been at forums like this in the past and asked the audience how many of you that live in HOAs are on the air either with permission of your HOA or possibly a hidden indoor antenna or something like that. And it's usually over 90%. And one of the more effective ways to do this is negotiating with your association. And Arizona Section Manager Rick Paquette, sitting behind me, has offered to assist amateurs in Arizona in these kind of negotiations. He was successful in getting permission. He has a tower and a beam on it, and lives in a specialized HOA which has an airport because he has his own plane. And presented correctly, many people have succeeded. Is it possible that some are not, or there are some homeowners associations that the rules are written in land deed restrictions? The answer is yes, but there are others in which case you can be successful. And at the board meeting, I actually introduced a motion which failed 5-10, that the league produce some kind of printed material that hams in HOAs can give to their HOA boards and architectural review committees as, call it, evidence that hams are good, and would show examples of antennas that HOAs have approved. I mean, there's hams that have antennas which basically look like old car radio antennas that you extend up when you need to use them. You push them down, and when you're not on the air, you can't really see them. And in most cases, and in many cases, that kind of thing could be approved. But if you end up with somebody who really doesn't like ham radio or something, in a present case, the HOA might not approve it. But again, I'm of the opinion that in my lifetime, you're more likely to succeed with negotiations than we are trying to get some kind of a law passed. Another thing to take into account is that even with like PRB 1 dealing with governments, when you're dealing with government trying to get a permit, it isn't necessarily true that you're going to end up with doing what you want without significant cost. There are hams who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars getting permits for their antennas from their governments. Let me repeat that. Not tens of dollars, not $100, not $100,000, but $200,000-$300,000 of legal fees to get them. So just because we would even get some kind of legislation passed in Congress, some hams might end up with extremely high legal bills in trying to enforce whatever it is should the HOA push back. So anyhow, does anyone have any comments on HOA legislation? I'll let the repeater up, and I'll also ask the audience here. Hearing none, we'll continue on to another subject. Let's see. Let's talk about the condition of the ARRL. The ARRL now has about 158,000 members. It's up about a little over 1,000 members from what we had a year ago. So our decline in membership, which was instituted because of our raising the dues from $39 to $49 a year, appears to have ended, and we're kind of sort of at a constant level or even slightly growing, which is good. Even more impressive than that to me is the ARRL is in substantially a fact position with regard to assets. The ARRL has $25 million more in assets than it had when I became a director. $25 million more. Now, some of those assets are needed to accommodate life memberships and people who have paid for 5 years or something like that. But a large amount of that money is available for us to conduct projects or whatever that we want out of it. So, as a consequence, my main concern is I think we need to find something to do with money more than we need to find money to add to that pile. There's another issue that's happened. I think I talked to this group about it last year. There's an organization called ARDC, Amateur Radio Digital Communications, and they're a group. Their management is in San Diego. They're hams that were involved with digital technology regarding ham radio. I believe their president was an executive at Qualcomm. They're technical guys for the most part. I have never worked any of them on the air as far as I know, but in talking to them, I find they have the same objectives as most of people that I talk to on the air as far as growing ham radio, getting people interested in it, advancing the level of technology. And as we know, they sold some internet addresses a year or more ago, and we didn't know how much they sold them for or who they sold them to. But back whenever somebody introduced these IP address system, the addresses were doled out to people, and ham radio got some large number of them, millions of them. And the ARDC guys, I don't know, they got 3 million or something of them, and they're not using anywhere near that number. They sold about a third of what they had for over $100 million. Now, I wish I was as smart and as whoever it was who had the idea to procure these and was able to do that. I don't know that much about that kind of internet stuff. But anyway, this group now has $100 million as in assets, and the IRS rules are they roughly have to distribute about 5 million of it every year, or they pay taxes on it. So their ham radio has another group of people with a large amount of money willing to work with the ARRL or anybody who has good ideas that can somehow advance ham radio. ARDC does not only work with ham radio, they work funding technical research in digital communications. They also have funded, I'll call it wireless infrastructure in some Indian tribes up in far northern California, the Hoopas and the Yurok and Miwoks, and so they're working at letting digital communications help the rest of society as well as ham radio. But again, overall, their goals seem to be the same as our goals, and I have suggested, and we have worked with them to some extent, and they're a large source of funding for projects. Now we'll go up onto the ARRL board meeting, and I will say the major thing that the board did that impacts the members was it authorized the hiring of a chief development officer whose job is basically to raise more money from the members. Now that was voted 14-1. The one who voted against it was someone who didn't think the league needed any more money. It needed projects to spend the money on. And if it needed more money, it should be looking at ARDC rather than asking more from our members. But I was outvoted significantly, so I suggest you talk to the other directors and find out what the reason for that is. But I've kind of given you my side to that little story, and and let's see what happens there. The league did some other things with respect to its finances. I'm going to break again. I wonder whether this is going to be disturbing on the video of it, but in any event, the league also authorized the formation of a committee to look at how we invest our money. The league has over $30 million of stocks and bonds, and right now it's all managed by one person, the ARL treasurer. And our treasurer is a professional CPA. He's done a good job of managing our money. He's trustworthy. He's a dedicated hand, and we don't know how much longer he's going to be in the position. And the question is, when the money has grown to this level, what should we be doing with it? Should we get someone else to take his place and pick individual stocks and pick individual mutual funds and individual bonds? Or should we turn the whole thing over to professional managers? Should we turn it over to maybe half goes to one money manager, half to another? I don't know what the right answer is, but we have a committee that will hopefully be researching the project and coming up with recommendations. No matter how you invest your money, it costs you something. And right now, our treasurer has done this completely free for nine going on 10 years, I think, this year. So we owe him a lot. He's grown our assets substantially, and I'm indebted to him, and I think we all should be. And this project with the new investment management committee is to just see how we should go on in the future. And I hope we'll be doing the right thing with respect to that. Does anyone have any comment on any of these financial issues that I'll look at the audience and I'll let up on the repeater?
I agree with you. I agree with you, Dick.
Okay, I have one of the audience agreeing with me, so there's at least two of us in America who feel that way. Let's see what else we have. One thing that I'll just pop in at this time is we've had a number of attempts at, I'll call ham radio club related scams that have taken place, actually some of them in the last week. And somebody with, I believe, has knowledge of ham radio and how it works, is sending these scam emails which are requesting people to get things like gift cards and iTunes cards and send them over the information for them over the internet or something, or relay the information over the telephone and transfer money. And it actually happened in the Southwest Division. All the section managers and anyone associated like that got an email allegedly from me saying that I needed them to get some iTunes cards. And fortunately, most people know that I'm too cheap to use iTunes, so at least that stopped them. But apparently somebody else actually in a radio club in Arizona got the same kind of email related to the president of that club and went and bought the cards, but somehow was able to get them canceled before he spent his money. Unfortunately, though, in a club in the Los Angeles area, someone was swindled out of $300 worth of these cards. So I don't know of anybody related to ham radio who has ever requested anyone to ever buy gift cards or iTunes cards, and I strongly suggest that if you ever see any of that, particularly if it's alleged to come from me, I've never bought a gift card or an iTunes card, please don't fall for it. It sounds simple, but somehow or other these guys are clever enough to make it look like it's real. And of course the emails from that were alleged to come from me had a name something like Director Leader something. It wasn't really my email address, but maybe the title was put up in a way that people would think it might be him. So, but just please don't bite on that. And I don't know if this has happened in other divisions, but it's happened out here. Any more comment on that?
I'm the chief of races in Riverside County, so I have from Blythe on down to Corona, and thank goodness I have not been hit up with that yet.
Okay, races stuff it appears to be ARRL or ARRL related club issue, so hopefully they'll not bother with races, and you won't have to deal with them. Any other comments on the radio? Okay. What else do we have? The ARRL has a new chief executive officer, David Minster, NA2AA. David comes across to me as a smart guy with great enthusiasm, interested in doing the job well, and I'm very optimistic that he's going to succeed. People are going to ask, well, it looks like you didn't vote for him, and that's indeed true. I thought we had another candidate who had, I'll say, more experience with the ARRL itself and more knowledge of hands that he could rely on to get jobs done. But the board made a choice, and we're proceeding. And again, I'm very hopeful that it's all going to work out. David Minster is heavily involved in communications. He's dealing with internet bloggers and interviewing with them. He interfaces with section operators and everything else, and that's important. I'm hopeful that he'll get the problems that are associated with headquarters taken care of as well. He has them on his to-do list, and hopefully it'll all work out. Basically, some people are talking about we need a new strategic plan for the league, and once we figure out what the strategic plan is, I have a good reminder to keep lights every now and then.
It's something
I'm there.
else. Still not transmitter audio.
Battery on? Is this radio dead or what? So this is not plugged in anywhere. Okay, what can we do? Here comes a possible VX5 or VX6.
No, cancel it F6.
What radio is it?
Kenwood F6, will that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You got a 6, you can use it.
Do that way too.
It's on.
If I do this, am I back on the air?
Yes.
But nothing's coming out of the big top.
Yeah, so DJ, you timed out about a minute ago.
Hello, am I back on the air?
Yep.
You're on the air very weakly. Very weakly.
We'll be in operation in a minute.
Okay, that one was okay. Yeah, DJ.
Alright, so you're gonna pull the charge.
Okay, how are we doing now? Are we back on the air?
This is Zero DJ, we're supposed to sound good signal.
I thank you, and it's even working here, so the technical crew here has overcome the battery wearing down problem. And now I have to remember where I was. Oh, with the, talking about this, the new strategic plan. And I happen not to be overwhelmed with necessity for detailed strategic plan. If you listen to ham radio on HF these days, there's this FT8 mode and FT4 mode that is completely digital. If you asked me 5 years ago, would anything like that be in existence and kind of a major component of on-the-air activity, I wouldn't have predicted it. But it has happened, and ham radio has, appropriately modified what it does to take it into account. What I think the ARRL needs to have is competency in 3 basic areas. One, we need to have technical people who understand the technology of radios, antennas, receivers, and whatever. We need to have people who understand ham radio. Hams, what do? They talk to each other, they do experiments, they do public service, they do overseas, they have conventions. We need to understand that. And the third major competency we need is internet technology capability, so that we can take advantage of computers and clouds and whatever, and appropriately have capability of addressing these things and providing service to our members. So anyhow, let's see what happens there. I'm again confident that in the end we'll end up having these 3 components that are, I believe, are needed. We'll get covered, and we'll proceed appropriately from there. Any comments on that? Okay. Other than that,
There's one comment on the air.
a comment on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I listen to, especially on 75 meters, I go down to the digital parts of the band and you go up into the, the extra and advanced portions of the band, and there's nobody there. And to me, there needs to be some kind of a realignment, because the voice bands are almost dead, and the digital bands are going quite strong. So, I don't know, that's just a comment from my K6ORJ Mark out of Fresno, California.
Okay, Mark, are you in Fresno right now?
Oh, no, I'm here. But, maybe a miracle if that to happen.
Okay, we had a comment that listening to the bands, particularly 75 meters, the general band is crowded, and the extra and whatnot bands are pretty empty, and digital bands are full, and there needs to be an alignment. And the league looks at those kind of things and is kind of worrying about them. I'll make again a comment about my political view of all this is, we have one band, 160 meters. There's no phone band, there's no CW band, there's no digital band. The hams do what they do in essentially every other country but the United States, and maybe a little bit of Japan. Hams spread out wherever they need frequencies. On 160 meters, most of the time there's a few CW stations at the bottom and some phone stations up higher. And then in a CW contest, the CW stations go up higher, and a few phone guys are bothered for a couple of hours. And then on Monday, life goes back to normal, and people have survived. And the same exact opposite thing happens in a 160-meter phone contest. The phone guys go down, and a couple of CW guys get upset. But then again, the contest ends on Sunday, and so somehow the band has expanded and contracted to fit whatever the hams need. And I think that's exactly what ought to happen on 75 meters. I don't think it was a great idea that the digital and CW generals were excluded from 3.6 to 3.7 megahertz for some phone guys. I think the band could have been open for both of them, and when one was using it, they probably would know enough not to plop down on the other guy's frequencies, and we'd be making more use of that spectrum. But that's something others are considering. The ARRL has an ARRL band planning committee that's looking at exactly those issues. Any other comments on that? Okay, let me just talk about something which I kind of consider semi-humorous. They ask the question, why do people become ARRL directors? Why do politicians become politicians? And what do they do that you might find interesting as far as if you're trying to understand how they react? If you look at this last ARRL board meeting's numbers of motions, most of the motions are sort of, I'll call them ceremonial or honorary related kind of motions. Some directors are having the ARRL recognize a certain radio club because it's been in existence for 100 years, or we even had one this time which was in existence for 50 years, and most of the ones in the Los Angeles area have been in existence for more than 50 years, but I don't bring these things to the attention of the National Association. I appreciate the fact that a lot of the clubs in the Southwestern Division have been active for that period of time, and encourage them to go ahead. But it's interesting to see how this stuff happens. One of the accomplishments of the headquarters staff was this year, even with the COVID-19 epidemic, and Connecticut had fairly harsh restrictions on working, the ARRL staff organized itself so that some came into the office, others were connected by telephone, and for the most part, the members were unaffected. We performed just like they did before from observation of the outside. And then, so the board actually thanked staff, and then there's a motion in there commending staff for their excellent performance with respect to that. But then again, somebody came up with the idea we should thank the members for enduring whatever they endured. So there's a motion with respect to that. I didn't quite understand that. But if you understand that board members are trying to do things which help ham radio and trying to make it look like they're particularly interested in you as an individual or people they know, that might in some way explain what's going on with that respect to things like that. Do we have any comments about that? Nope. Let's see what else there might be. A lot of you got an email in the last week or two, which something was called, from the ARRL called, what is the purpose of ham radio? And it said some nice things about hams, and you're wondering why it happened. Well, ham radio has gotten some unpleasant publicity related to the recent incident at the U.S. Congress, where it was alleged that people were using handheld radios to plan out their actions. It's not surprising that some people might, but I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that the ARRL thought that a lot of people thought having a ham license meant they didn't have to obey other rules of the government, but and needed to be reminded of it. But in any event, the FCC sent out something to the public, and basically the league kind of regurgitated that in more cryptic language. So the league didn't make it clear why that message was sent out, but it wants to be recognized that the ARRL and ham radio are not behind any of this stuff. If you have a license, the rules are. And this caused a great dust up among some ARRL board members that ham radio was being used, or handheld ham radios were being used for this kind of purpose. But if you live in Southern California, you know for years that people are buying them and using them to communicate in moving humans and other goods across the border to the south. And it just, what happens. The league is taking efforts to make sure ham radio gets mentioned distinctly, and we don't get the name ham radio used as a blanket to cover CB, FRS, DMRS, and any kind of walkie-talkie. That's what's happened to Kleenex, or Xerox. Those were brands, and now you call tissues Kleenexes. Well, we don't want that to be these other handheld radio related things to be called ham radio, and we get any kind of negative publicity from that. Any comments on that? Does anyone have any other issue they'd like to bring up? Questions, comments, criticisms?
W6DIS with a comment.
W6DIS, go ahead.
Yeah, on that laptop, Amazon sells 5 and 10 packs of nail fangs, talkies, and kind of getting tarred with the same brush. If people are buying those, it's because they're there, not the damaged radio.
Well, I gather, did everyone hear that? The answer is, I don't think we can stop Amazon from selling packs of Baofeng radios, and they're not supposed to be used for communication on ham bands or other bands without licenses and things like that, but it's, I don't know how to stop it, and anyone else have any comment on that? We want to also bring the fact that in the United States, humans murder each other with like a rate of 45,000 a year or some large number like that. And that's in some way due to the fact that some of them have guns. And if you look at a country like England, well, they have 35 murders a year. So why don't people ban guns? I don't think in my lifetime guns are going to be banned anywhere in the United States, even if somebody could make a good argument. And we have the same kind of freedom with respect to buying radios. I don't know how you could successfully stop this. In addition to being able to buy radios that could be used for good purposes or bad purposes, remember we have, the hams have a problem in that devices are being sold that are lighting devices or electrical devices that create interference to our ham bands. And there's supposed to be some kind of rules, Part 50 FCC rules, that if you're an unintentional radiator, you have to correct them. But a lot of devices are being sold that aren't corrected, and we can't stop that. So it's I don't know how to solve that in particular. Any other comments on that subject?
AF0DJ.
AF0DJ, go ahead.
A lot of our major amateur radio dealers will sell to anyone with or without a license. All the person has to say is, well, I'm thinking about getting a license. And, well, that's just the way life is. We're supposed to be capable of following rules in this country.
Yes, everyone here heard the comment that many of the amateur radio equipment dealers are, in addition, selling equipment to people who don't have licenses, but some will have the reasonable excuse that they're about to get a license. So, again, that's a very hard issue to police, and what I don't have any objection to someone who's going to take the test next Saturday, having bought his radio a week ahead of time, if he doesn't use it until then. And I don't know how to police it, and I don't know that it's worth society's investment, and I don't think they actually ever will get a police force to stop something like that. Any more comments? Okay, anyone else with any other comments, criticisms, suggestions?
N7ZEV with the question.
N7ZEV, go ahead.
Your statement earlier about assets, I understood was 20 million in assets, 50 million in stock. Is that right? For a total of 50?
No, the total assets are a little over 40. And part of those assets are in investments. About 31 or something is in those kind of investments. And then we have buildings and other things. So the total investment, the total net assets are total assets are the largest number, and that's about 41 million, although the related ARRL Foundation has another 5 million in assets that are basically managed by the same group of people. So we have 41 million in assets, about 31 million in bonds and stocks. Go ahead.
QB7IQ informative that instead of hiring an asset manager and an investment manager would seem to mean we ought to consider reducing dues.
Yes.
We had a suggestion to reduce dues, and we had a lot of favorable nods out here in the audience as well, and I wasn't in favor of raising them. And the interesting thing to note is we could probably reduce our dues to 0 for 3 years and still be in much better financial shape than we were 10 years ago. But let's see what the board does with these kind of thoughts and suggestions. Any more comments, suggestions?
KB7IQ.
KB7IQ.
Yeah, just a suggestion, Dick, when you go for suggestions, allow a little bit of time, 5 to 10 seconds or so, because it takes that long for people just to react.
Understood. So I will ask for suggestions and leave the frequency open for a little while. Go ahead. J60RJ, go ahead. Okay, the point was made that not all the assets are liquid, and that's indeed the case. 31 million or so are in stocks and bonds. Those are fairly liquid, and some proportion of those are needed for covering the life membership and the term membership dues. I don't propose selling any buildings at this point, but a substantial part of that $30 million, maybe 15 or 20, could be spent on projects. And that's what I think we should be concentrating on if we want to do anything. Go ahead.
That's all I was
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Last call for comments, suggestions, criticisms. I thank you all for attending. This is N6AA, handing it back to AR1SS.
And we thank Dick for coming out here again. This is his 10th or 11th year coming out to Quartzfest to talk to us, and all the way from Los Angeles just for this, just to talk to us. So thank you so much, Dick.
You're very welcome.
KR1SS.
Very good.
Thank you.
A few minor technical things.